So welcome everyone, Maria from Canadian Pine Pollen, and really excited that we can join today for our community conversation. And every week we like to connect with people who are passionate about pine pollen. And today we have a couple of guests. We have Ben from Forest for Dinner and Ryan, who is from Toronto, who's a new brand ambassador and really passionate about pine pollen as well. And Burgess from Canadian Pine Pollen. Let me pin you here, Burgess. Hello, welcome. And I'm going to pin Ben. And Ryan will pin you when you come on to share too. So we'll just get started. And Ben, I would love to hear about how you got connected with pine pollen.
Hi, so I'm Ben. I live on Vancouver Island, originating from France. I have been on and off in Canada for the last 17 years. I first moved to Canada in 2002 to do my master degree in agroforestry at University Laval in Quebec. And I quickly got specialized in what we call non-timber forest products. So everything you might find in the forest. Can you hear me? Yes? Yeah, okay. Anything that you can find in the forest that might have a commercial value, but that is not timber. So pine pollen is a really good example of a non-timber forest product. But we created our own company with my wife Celia here on Vancouver Island. We've been in the wild foraging industry for the last 12 years. But we created our own company about 7 years ago, and 3 years ago we moved into our own processing facility here on the island in Port Alberni, where we really diversified. So pine pollen is one of the products we have been helping with the harvest in the past. We're still connected with Burgess and Said for punctual help, but we specialize here on the island in harvesting over 80 different products from the forest. And we have a lot of different kind of clients. Some of them will be breweries, distilleries, restaurants. Then we do our own line of retail products that we retail in stores across Vancouver Island and some places in BC. And lately, because there is a really big interest in everything wild and wild harvested, we work on a lot of special projects with First Nation as well to help them out on mapping the resources that they might have on their land.
When did you get started in this foraging, like as a professional forager?
In 2012, we moved with my wife Celia from Quebec to basically like we met each other, me and Celia in Australia while we were backpacking, as many young people do, and working holiday visa. And we got to do a lot of fruit picking as a job, while backpacking, because that's an easy way to keep traveling and make a bit of money, even if you don't speak the language really well. And we got pretty good at it. They were getting paid on piece rate, so harvesting cherries, mandarins, apples on piece rate. I did that for over 3-4 years in Australia, New Zealand. And when we met, me and Celia, it happened that we had that in common, that Celia did a bachelor degree in Canada as well, even if we were both French. And we decided after our working holiday visa was over in Australia to move back to Canada. And we stayed 1 year in Quebec, trying to get a normal job, both of us, but we didn't really enjoy it after 4 years of van life and traveling. And we remember about that opportunity that we'd met some people in the cherry orchard, that some people would go in the forest and harvest morels for money. They would go and get dropped in a fire and pick morels and sell it to the closest buyer, and would make money that way. So for us, it was kind of the best of two worlds, because that was like piece rate job, the same than in an orchard, but actually in the wilderness with no pesticide and not all the cons of working in a farm. And also it reconnected me with my master degree, actually. And starting from there, we just fell in love with that job of being in nature and harvesting products. And slowly we moved to Vancouver Island for the Chantrelle season. And little by little, we started to harvest more products and see there was a big demand. So we created our own company. And over the years, we have been connected with Burgess and Said. I think that was back in 2016, actually, really at the early stage. and they posted this ad on online that they were looking for maybe a harvester of pine pollen. So me, that was a new product. Every new product, I'm attracted to it because I love mapping and looking for new ecosystems. And yeah, we helped them out designing the way we could harvest it, and we did kind of R&D, with them from the early stage.
Yeah, so I think you're one of the originals that started on the first harvest season.
Yeah, we were like, I mean, actually, that was like the first harvest season back in 2016. They didn't know really what to expect, like they just knew there was pine pollen on the market coming from China, and like they were like, oh man, like there's so many pines in Canada, there must be a way to get our own pine pollen and to get a better source of the product to make sure of more traceability and where it was coming from. And at first we all looked on YouTube and looked like, okay, what's the way to harvest pine pollen? Should we wait for the tree to be pollinating and trying to put a bag or like a vacuum, or like harvesting the bud before they actually open? And so we did a lot of back and forth, trial and error, and eventually they found out the proper way to do it. So now they can extract the pollen from the buds just before they open. We harvest them, and yeah, it's as many different wild products, it's like there is not much as resources about the way to harvest it, the sustainability behind it. And so that was a lot of time spent in the bush and trying different things until we nailed it.
I imagine that pine pollen is one of the harder things to harvest in the wild.
There is a lot of challenges with many of the products we harvest. What pine pollen, as some of the product, what is challenging is first, like the shelf life of the product once harvested. The same with like spruce tips, or sometimes some mushrooms like morels. Those products, once taken off the tree or off the ground, tend to overheat really quickly, especially if they are in an enclosed container. So there's really this emergency of getting the product either into storage or on drying racks to not lose the product. And that's what makes a part of the harvest really really difficult, because you have to coordinate with, like, we sometimes travel for hours on really remote gravel roads. So at the end of an harvest day, you're already tired and you need to get the product as quick as possible on a safe place. Regarding the harvest itself, yeah, there is some challenges as well, because that's in the spring. There is a lot of mosquitoes. There is, like, of course, wildlife encounters. There's a risk of being lost, being injured, but that is with all the products we do. The only thing, sometimes what you have to be really more careful with the Ponderosa pine harvest, especially, that's something I'm not confronted to on other harvests we do, is like ticks. There is a lot of ticks now in the Okanagan Valley. And so that's something you need to be aware of when you go pine pollen harvesting, is like, every night checking your body if there is no ticks attached to it.
Do you typically harvest with a partner, or you are on your own?
Because I'm really experienced, I tend to do a lot of days in the bush just on my own. But it's always safer, of course, to go as 2 or 3 people. If you can go as a small crew of 3, 4 people with 2 different cars, that helps a lot, because if one car breaks down 150 kilometers down a gravel road, that's at least you get a way to escape it. And yeah, it's always recommended, to work as a small crew when you do wild foraging, especially when you go in remote areas.
Yeah. And what does your day look like? Do you have to get up before dawn and start early before it gets too hot, or?
Yes, like that's a lot, that's what people don't realize sometimes behind those non-timber forest products. It's like there is a lot of organization behind it. You need the right gears, you need to find the right spot. It's not like you wake up in the morning and you just drive in the forest and stop. You need to do a lot of scouting first, to, like, okay, what area looks good for harvest. So really often, the day is going to be changing from a day to another one. Some days going to be really focused on the harvest, while some days going to be actually to try and find some good areas for the harvest in the next few days. So that's a lot of different skills. But usually, yes, waking up early. Really often we camp in the bush, so sometimes we're close to town, but really often we just have to set up camp in the bush. So it always takes you a bit more time in the morning to get organized and, get your breakfast going in your forest kitchen and trying, to get a lot of energy, a lot of calories in the morning because it's really demanding. You're carrying a lot of weight. You're walking a lot. And so then you will go out, like, sometime it's going to be 1 hour drive to the blocks we're going to be targeting. And then hopefully you're in a good block, so you might be able to spend the whole day there in the same block, but sometimes you're going to have to change block during the day. And so you harvest, you put your harvested buds in containers, and then at the end of the day, like you keep them on the shade, during the day. And at the end of the day, you're gonna pack everything back into the truck and drive to the closest point where you can meet Burgess and give him some buds so he can follow up on the process and driving them as quick as possible. And us, of course, we're gonna go back to camp. Really often it's gonna be like a jump in the river or the closest lake as a shower and cooking and go to bed.
Jumping in the lake in the middle of the harvest day sounds really refreshing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And how can people learn more about Forest for Dinner, your company?
Forest for Dinner. So we have, all the social media. You can go on Instagram, you can go on Facebook, and we have a website that explains a story, and we have an online store, of course. It's forestfordinner.ca. And yeah, we often do, some media release, or like a lot of people come to us to ask us about what we do, because it's especially since the pandemic, people are really interested in like trying to know what's the food out there. And we also started 2 years ago to give foraging tours. And so we give foraging tours here on Vancouver Island, where people come and like for 2-3 hours, we go on a private property and go over 30 to 40 different plants, and we explain what we can do with them. And really often I actually tell people about pine pollen and, Canadian pine pollen in Vancouver and what they do with the pines, because that's one of the products that is really available everywhere in Canada.
So I'm curious, what's your favorite product that you have that you sell on your website?
Oh, I love, and that's really popular right now, is like, I love everything about spruce tips. So we do spruce tip jelly, we do pickled spruce tips. Pickled spruce tips are really a hot sale right now. And of course, coming from France, I love morels. So I love dried morels, but we do as well marinated morels. So ready to eat, just packed in jar with oil, kind of antipasto. And those one are really, really good on cheese board or charcuterie platter,
So we sell morels as well. Are you part of the harvesting of the Canadian Pine Pollen morels?
Not specifically for morels. I mean, like Burgess knows that we've been, before we did like a retail line of product, we did, me and my wife used to be the second exporters of morels in Canada in 2018 and 19. We were actually setting up 6 buying stations. We had up to 100 pickers in the bush and getting 2,000-3,000 pounds of morels a day. That was a big operation that we decided to stop. And we exported like tons of dried morels to Europe. And now, I still go morels hunting, but just for supplying Forest for Dinner. We don't go with big crews anymore. So usually, like, for example, this year is going to be a really good morel season, but we're just going to go out for maybe 2-3 weeks and just get the volume we need for ourselves. So we don't really do wholesale of morels anymore.
So all of our morels must come from Randy. We met
Yeah.
Randy a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we get all our spruce tips from Ben though. Ben is the person we get all our spruce tips from. So, yeah, that's for sure. And yeah, no, Ben's been such a huge part of our business just from day one. Like he's been pretty much, I feel like, in the same conversation as all of us, like the founders of me, Saeed, and like he's been there since day one. So it's really cool that you're on the chat here, Ben. I really appreciate you coming on and explaining this.
Good to see you, Burgess.
Everybody, and yeah, being part of the conversation. Ben just did a cool project for us. He went up to the Soyuz Native Indian band there and met with them and gave them a little bit of a consulting information about the Ponderosa on their property. So that's an exciting new project that Ben helped us with. And, we'll start working with the First Nations and start getting some Ponderosa from their land as well, leading up. And hopefully this leads into an opportunity for them to kind of empower their people and have them picking product off their property and giving them more value out of their land. So yeah, I really appreciate that, Ben. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to help us out with that. And Ben's helped us out with pickers too each year. I think there's always a few new staple pickers that are a huge part of our community that is referenced by Ben. So, and then, yeah, just, Ben's an expert of the forest. Like Said and I are specialties in other aspects of things, but Ben is the person we turn to a lot of times when we need information that we don't have knowledge about. So anybody that is interested in seeing what Ben does on his website or following or doing one of his tours, I think that would be one of the best investments you can make if you're interested in nature, for sure. I really feel like out of my experience and meeting with a lot of people that are knowledgeable at the forest, Ben is at the top.
Thank you, Burgess. And actually, just one last thing regarding this topic of First Nation and pine pollen on the properties. Like I was actually on a meeting this morning with some people of the government of BC that we do consulting for First Nation, and the trend is definitely as unceded territory being given back to First Nation communities. And I think what it's gonna mean is like a lot of the traditional forestry management we have been seeing in BC over the last 40-50 years might take a big turn in the years to come, because I think there is a lot more things to do than just harvesting timber. Pine pollen is a really good example towards it. And we were actually discussing with them this morning, about pine pollen, and because they have a lot of First Nations that could be potentially interested with supplying a company like Burgess and Side's company. And the other thing that might be really interesting in the future is doing some formal research, and development on the harvest itself. We have been doing a lot of empirical, data or record keeping, over the years. But I think for spruce tips, pine pollen, and a few other products that start to be really like harvested at higher scale, it's really important to look towards sustainability and management of the forest, and how we could be included in the forest management in, like bringing a sustainable revenue from some blocks of forest on a yearly basis, instead of waiting 60 years and to cut the tree and start all over again. So I think that there is a lot of discussion to be happening in the future on those subjects, and First Nation people are going to be one of the probably some of the people the most involved towards a different forest management.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, and that's important for us to revisit the same areas year after year. Like we really want to make sure that we can have these little beautiful chunks of land that can go back year after year, and it's well maintained, and we can get our product from these areas. We're kind of adopting these areas in a way, is probably a nice way to put it, but really well said. Like I really feel like there's so much value in the Canadian forest, and especially with non-timber forest products, and bringing awareness to all these different products that we have in the forest is just bringing value to more than just logging in the forest. It's bringing attention to all these cool products we have in our own backyard and the value of it. So I hope it encourages people too, just to get outside more as well. Like that's one of the things I'm really passionate about spreading is, I hope people understand how blessed we are to live in a country that we do, and have an experience to get out and actually see what's out there is it's not only, it's one of the best things you can do for your health, and also just to become really grateful for, the areas we live in.
Ryan, I actually just seen your post on the chat there. That's funny, because I have been trying to determine a little bit better, the growing degree days on the readiness of pine pollen, and that's a good example, of what could be done as a really more systematic research. I don't know where you get your data from, because I've been looking at a few data of those, But so for me, you know, that's the thing with what is really, really challenging in harvesting wild product at a large scale is like you just have a 2 or 3 weeks window, and that's it for your supply for the year. Those products, you know, you won't get them for any other suppliers because there is none. So everything you get is what you're going to be harvesting in those 3 weeks. So that's really, really important to be efficient during those 3 weeks. And that's true for pine pollen, but that's true for most of the product we harvest here at Forest for Dinner. And so it's really important to set up some control points that you can rely on to know when your harvest season is going to start. This year is a really good. This year is a really, really good example. We are about 2 weeks and a half ahead of schedule. And one way, you know, you always hear people saying, oh, like the spring is early or the spring is late. And like, but really often, you know, it's just based on your memories from last year or the year before. It's really, really important actually looking at accurate data. And so that's what I have been doing, you know, recording, like, you know, what's the closest weather station of the place we harvest, what kind of data we can get from there, and trying to see if we're on average year, or earlier a year, or late year. So, you know, I've seen that before, and I ended up doing that because, like, I remember 2016, the Morel season started 3 weeks and a half earlier than usual. And nobody believed it, but that's actually what happened. And it could have been easy to predict if people were looking at the growing degree days. So yeah, that's one of the indicators that can be really reliably used. I think on my side that like as soon as the temperature is above 0 degree, there start to be activities in the pine pollen buds. So you can start from January 1st, everything above 0 degrees. For some plants, you know, like like corn, for example, you're going to have to look at the degree days above 5 degrees Celsius. But for a lot of product, as soon as it's above 0 degrees, you start to have an activity. So you can start from there.
That's great. Does anyone have any other questions for Ben? Okay. Ben, I know that you've been scouting the progress of the Ponderosa, getting ready for harvest. And one of the properties that we harvest on, I'm going to share my screen. She sent us pictures of the buds that are developing. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
And that was April 22nd. Let's see. This is April 22nd, and this was April 11th.
Yeah.
So it's just starting to grow, and we're going to track the progress there. And then this is just a photo of the landscape on her property.
What is really important as well regarding especially Ponderosa pine, lodgepole pine is a bit more consistent from year to year. But there is still some really big unknown in the Ponderosa pine. Like it seems that's a bit like the seeds, you know, like you have some really good years for like oak trees, for example, for like the acorns. And you can have some really, really good year for the pine pollen buds on Ponderosa pine. And I think that's something, you know, if there was like a couple of scientists, maybe a master degree or a PhD looking into it seriously for a couple of years, we might be able to understand better what's the schedule behind it, you know, what's the or you could say like just a cycle of it, and maybe to predict better if it's going to be a good year or a bad year. I'm pretty sure it could be found that there is indicators that actually going to tell you in advance if you're looking at a good harvest or a bad harvest. Because I know Burgess and Said have been struggling in the last few years with like consistency on the yellow pine. Some years it's going to be really good, and some years it's going to be kind of really low production.
Yeah, that's one thing we did find. Yeah, over the last years, it does vary. We've had 2 seasons ago, there was no Ponderosa, like very, very little. So yeah, tracking all this information, heat days, humidity, all this type of stuff for us going forward is obviously something that we take into consideration as well. And yeah, it helps us determine when we're going to be ready to start picking. But yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge for the Ponderosa. Lodgepole becomes a little bit more, like Ben was saying, a little bit more reliable each year to go in the same areas. And I feel like there's a lot more areas that have lodgepole opposed to Ponderosa as well. Basically in the southern tip of Canada is basically where it starts, and then it goes out through down the States. but yeah, it's still a nice product to pick, even in the areas that we are in. There's a lot of good areas, I feel like, that, you know, really generate a pretty good yield.
Yeah.
If the year allows us to pick it.
Yeah.
We
I see
have,
quite a yeah, go ahead, Maria.
oh, go ahead, you go.
Yeah, I see quite a few questions in the chat there, Ryan, John, and Brendan. So Ryan, how do you control picking bad harvest, mold, fungus, and bug? That's a really good question, and it does apply to all the product we harvest. Last year, for example, we've been working for over 24 months with a vermouth company that just released this product. It's called Esquimalt Wine Company, and they've done a vermouth made of 100% native botanicals from Vancouver Island. And so we did a lot of research and development, trying to find the right bitterness agent and the right product they wanted. And that was a really good example of those things. Is like most of those products I never harvested before. So to go on the land, try to see, to determine myself the quality control stuff, you know, and that's like, okay, is that leaf moldy? What is a good leaf? What is the peak season? All those kind of things. And of course, that's really something really important. And there is no shortcut to it. It's like experience over the year. The most you harvest it, the more years of experience you have, the better it is to control the quality and understand, you know, what is at peak season and what can be a problem as, you know, bugs or mold or all those kind of things. I learn every year, you know, with the spruce tips. Now I have a really good system in place to make sure to ensure quality control. But for sure, the first year you harvest a new product, that's really challenging. You know, you might encounter some problems that you had no clue about. Sometimes it's going to be worms, sometimes it's going to be bugs on morels. We had some years with a lot of wormy morels. Now I understood why some area is going to produce more wormy morels than others. But once again, there is really little data that already exists on that. So that's you to create your own data and have years of experience. John, I don't export in the US yet. One day we're looking into that, but to be honest, we're struggling to keep up with demand right now just on Vancouver Island. So the next step is BC, and then we will see if we go further. We don't aim at becoming big. We've done a lot of really big volume export to Europe, and that's not something we're interested in anymore. We more focus on local harvest and local sales if we can. Brendan, what I have as suggestion to be an effective harvester, that's the same advices I would give to anybody that's going to work on piece rate in tree planting or cherry picking or apple picking. Is like trying to be consistent. A lot of people, you know, gonna try to do a record day and like come back and say like, wow, man, today I picked 150 pounds of that product. Yeah, but then for 2 days they scrap, you know, and they stay at camp because they're too tired. It's really, really important in piece rate job to keep your pace, to find your pace and to keep it. And as you're more experienced, you might do longer days, but you might find out as well that you might pick as much in 8 hours with good meal at night and good meal in the morning, rather than trying to stay 12 hours where you're gonna burn yourself. You know, it's really all the people that I have seen over the years in the Morels, in the Pine Pollen, or in other products doing the most money over a period of 2 months are never record breakers. They consistent people that go out every day and that are serious at what they're doing. And of course, you know, over like to be more effective, I mean, I do a lot of GIS mapping. So I map out a lot of the things. I keep tracks of everything I do. For the last 12 years, every single day I have been out, I have my GPS tracks. I have the volume I have been harvesting, and I have my drying ratio and all of those data. Keep track of everything you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's so true. Of all the people we've had picked, you know, it's generally the people that are consistent day after day are the ones that are bringing in the most volumes over the season. And yeah, it's true. It's hard work out in the field. People do get worn out, tired, injured, and those are the people that, you know, are trying to push themselves too far every, you know, and try to get that extra mile. So being conscious of eating properly, getting enough rest, and getting out there and just being diligent. And again, just getting back to what Ben was saying about the tracking, all those, again, all the people that have been the most successful are people that are aware of where they were last year and what areas were good and what time they started pollinating, and they have a system down. It's systematic. It's not going out there and just thinking you're going to be in a specific area and everything is going to work out for you. You have to make sure that you're prepared. So absolutely.
Thanks so much, Ben, for coming on our call today and sharing your experience and stories. We really appreciate you being part of the Canadian Pine Pollen community.
You're welcome. I was glad to be able to share my experience.
I look forward to coming to the island and being part of one of your foraging dinners.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Yeah. And John, I'll get some of the food for you and cross border and ship it to you. Okay, well, we're going to move on to our next guest, which is Ryan from Toronto. Ryan, do you want to hop on? Just check the comments here.
Trying to follow that up is pretty tough.
But you just share your passion for pollen. We only met last week, and Ryan is one of our new brand ambassadors, and he's really excited to work with us.
I feel like I'm following the master right now. It's, I'm just in training, so I don't think I'll ever be at that level, but I hope to be. But a lot of things that Ben was saying, I feel personally connected to. I go through the same struggles. It's what I've been doing without putting it down on paper, without, you know, having my science behind it. I've just been, I guess, haphazardly going about my way, kicking the can down the street and finding my way. And when you do find a good pollen tree and you find a lot of pollen on the tree and you start harvesting and get it in a bucket and you sieve it, and then you try it, and it's just something that's really indescribable because it's really coming from nature. It's like you're discovering something that, you know, not many people know of. I love telling people about pine pollen. I don't know if it's loud here. Can you guys hear the background music? Is it drowning out or anything? I'll hold my mic like this.
I think it's okay.
Okay, I'm actually just at a restaurant. Since I was on my way home and I just ordered dinner just so I could use the Wi-Fi and use my computer. But if you look at the top of the list here, I put in the chat there some of the amino acids, which are some of them are essential, some of them are non-essential. So basically, the essential amino acids are the ones our body needs every day, and then the non-essential ones are, I believe. Just let me see here. You know, I'm not really a science guy. I would love to be. So a non-essential amino acid, the body makes from another amino acid. So you need all these amino acids in your body to do certain functions. A lot of these that are in the pine pollen, I noticed, have to do with nerve function, protein, building blocks. So for me, when I first discovered it, it was I put a couple pictures in there. I was very young, and I noticed in the hieroglyphs in Egypt, they were holding pine cones in their hand. There was, you know, there was pine cones on the top of staffs, and there was pine cones in the Vatican, and I was just really wondering, like, what's the connection? Like, what is this hidden secret that these ancient religions and ancient societies are basically putting in front of us? In the modern day, we look at the pine pollen as something that just symbolizes like a Fibonacci sequence, the tree of life, just one of these natural symbols. But I kept digging further and further and further. And I believe that first one where you had up with, I think that's Horus. He was a pharaoh, and he has the pine cone in his hand. And I believe in the bag he's holding, in my life, in my world, I like to believe he's holding up a bag of pine pollen. I don't know if anyone has ever really known what's in the bag. Obviously, we can't go back and know what they were holding in that bag, but I really believe some people say he's not holding a pine cone, he's holding a fig, but it looks like a pine cone. Either way, I believe in the bag, he's holding the pine pollen and he's fertilizing the plants with it. He's basically like how a bee would go in through in nature and pollinating things. So he's using that pollen to pollinate life. And I kept looking, figuring out, hey, what is in this pine pollen from there? I noticed it's full of all these amino acids and hormones and different, just all this different things inside of it. And I couldn't believe that it was sitting outside my house. You know, when I was a little kid, I used to run around in pine pollen season. I used to hit the pine tree with my hand and the pollen would go flying in the air. And like, I really felt like, oh, inspired. And I would hurt my hand and it would prick my hand because the pine needles are surrounding it. But as a kid, I was really fascinated with pine pollen, 12 years old. So when later in my 20s, when I figured this out, I fell back in love with it. And I realized that, hey, maybe I was doing good to myself as a young child without even knowing, right? I was just attracted to the plant. And then, I started trying to figure out like what's more into it. Obviously, everyone puts a pine tree in their house at Christmas. And, we celebrate the pine tree. And I was like, wow, this is amazing technology that's so hidden from us. It's something that like, can you imagine any other tree in the world having this ability for us to worship it every year? Like there must be something bigger to it. And we put the gifts under the Christmas tree every year. Now I'm thinking, is this kind of the symbolism for the pine pollen falling to the ground? Right. And yeah, it's just been a good journey. When you look at the chemicals or the acids that are in the pine pollen, it seems like it's such beneficial for our body, nerve cells, brain cells, nerve activity, brain activity, neurotransmitters. To me, it just seems like it's something that's really special. So I really want to get it out to people because I think it can help a lot of people with a lot of different ailments, not just energy. A lot of them have to do with energy production as well. There's tryptophan, a feel-good hormone. There's obviously the adaptogenic hormone in it, which can be your body would produce the male hormone testosterone or the female hormone estrogen. So just looking at it for me, I was like, seems like this is more than just a superfood. This is something that we should be ingesting. It seems like pine pollen itself, the season is so short. And usually in life, when you have something that is so sacred, that's because it's so valuable. You have 4 seasons. This happens in June or May. And it just seems like just because of how scarce it is, that to me shows that it's such a high quality product that the earth is giving to us. And yeah, I've always been obsessed with it. I tell people about it. I've never heard anything bad about it,
How do you usually take the pine pollen? Like, do you take it daily?
I would no, I haven't taken it daily. If I'm having a bad day, I'll take it. If I'm feeling low in energy, I'll take it. I always believe like moderation for anything. If you keep taking something, I believe your body will get lazy. I could be wrong, but
it's always interesting to hear how people are taking it and how much they need and what they're experiencing. Yeah. How does your body feel after you're using pine pollen?
It's incredible. Like I take it with a spoon and I just put it in my mouth, usually water. Like I was telling you the other day, I shot it down with some Red Bull. And I was able to pull an all-nighter. I was working on a project, and I really feel it gives me a focus. Like if there is a, we have a pineal gland in our brain, and it seems to be nourishing that part of our brain. And I do feel that, a lot of people, this new age thinking, people are talking about pineal gland, creating your own world, law of attraction. And I believe pine pollen might be one of those keys in everybody being able to create their own world that they want, right? It's not just something that we're eating for good food, whatever. It might actually help with creating the world you law of attraction, the pineal gland. There's a lot of research going into, how people perceive the world, and just how many people go see a therapist every day, how many people need to go and get coaching, like I'm getting coaching. And it seems like pine pollen can help with that as well. So when people are having a bad month, a bad year, they're stuck in a rut, I believe pine pollen and a little bit of positive thinking and focus can help people get into the place they want to be.
So pine pollen for you is not just nutritional, but it's also a very spiritual practice, would you say?
Yeah, well, I believe that the ancient Egyptians were a spiritual culture. And so, since they did have it etched in stone with one of the god of virility, Horus, holding it, to me, it does seem like you can create with it. A funny side note, if any of you guys, I think we're all of age here, where we've watched the movie Back to the Future, and Marty McFly, he goes back in time and he runs over a pine tree. First thing he does, he gets back in time, the DeLorean goes back to the 50s, and the first thing he does is run over a pine tree. And when he leaves the 80s, he goes from a place called Twin Pine Mall, and then when he gets back to the future, it's now called Lone Pine Mall. And what's funny about that is that Lone Pine Mall was actually where, when he goes back in time, he knocks over that tree because the person in the movie was breeding pine trees. So this guy, his name was Old Man Peabody. He was breeding pine trees in the movie, and then when it comes back, it's a mall now. The government had taken over that land and knocked down all the pine trees and called it Twin Pine Mall. And then in the third series, he goes back to the cowboy days in Back to the Future 3, and it's set in the same place of the Lone Pine Mall. So all three movies where he goes back and forth in time, it's specifically on those grounds where the pine tree is. And I think Hollywood somehow subliminally has tried to correlate the pine tree to altering our own realities. He goes back, he creates a new reality, he goes back, tries to change a new reality, he goes forward, and every time it's in this specific place where this man was breeding pine trees. I just thought it was an interesting fact. Kind of gets into my brain, the type of guy I am. I like to put things together and like play with things and imagine. But yeah, it's just part of who I am. I love to like, think and be like, wow, that's cool. Like what's really going on here? And the pine tree, I think, is what's really going on here.
I love that connection. That's really cool. I'll have to watch Back to the Future now.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Ryan, for sharing your passion for pollen. We're really excited to be working with you as one of our new brand ambassadors. And I just want to open it up to anyone who's on the call. And if you have any questions or anything that came to mind when Ryan was sharing, we'd love to hear from you as well. Or any other additional questions for Ben before we wrap it up. Hey, Andrea.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I just feel like adding something I mentioned before, and I think I also touched on it last week in our conversation. As you were explaining, Ryan, what I feel is that the pine tree stands upright like we do. It has an upright position. It has a trunk, so to speak, or a spine, we could call it. It has one strong part of its body, and then off come the branches, and planted firmly on Mother Earth. And that's my goal every day. I'm a Pisces, so grounding is very important for me to stay that way. So in that,
I'm a Pisces too, so
Oh,
I
what day?
get you.
What day?
March 14th.
Oh, 4th.
Yeah,
I'm on the 4th, much better. So in that sense, I feel a sense of reverence for this amazing creation called a pine tree. And maybe that's where the ancient people came from as well as their point of reference, that they recognized certain similarities and the divinity within that. And when you harvest from the tree, and unless you just forage it and just don't go about it in a very loving way, the pine tree gives the fruit to you. So how amazing is that? And then ingesting the pollen and the pine tincture, what other qualities of light and frequencies might be in there contained to feed us? The resilience of the tree, as I've mentioned before, it's been through how many seasons, how many adverse weather events has this tree been through? How has the tree interacted with wildlife or with humans too? So I think there's a lot of similarities and a sort of a reverence that we could have for the tree. And I don't know how old these trees get, but probably much older than we would, right? So yeah, that was my contribution today.
Thanks,
I do.
Andrea.
I think they're one of the oldest trees. So I believe they're one of the oldest trees.
Hmm.
So, and I was telling you guys last week, I believe that the pine tree is actually a symbol of source energy. So if we were to
Makes sense.
yeah, if we were to figure out whatever source energy is and map it and make it look in reality, it's pulling from source energy, and it is similar. It looks similar. It's produced. I think it's tapped into it's the expression of source energy, and that's why it has so many good things in it. So if everything that's being held together, I think as physics and all these sciences get down to the nitty-gritty, they will probably have a symbol of, a triangle, like the pine tree, right? Fractal energy.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I love how everyone that comes onto our calls they're very deep in their contemplation about pine trees and pine cones, and really have you always share, Andrea, you have such a reverence for the tincture that we make and when you take it. So I really appreciate all of your shares and learn so much when we meet.
Well, Maria, I want to, before I got the sample coming to me, I do want to go to get my saliva test, which will check out my hormone levels and my just different things that they can capture in the saliva. And then I want to take the tinctures and the pine pollen on a regular and then go and check how far off I am from baseline. So
Yeah, that's great.
My own little scientific study.
Next week, we have a guest, Isaac, coming on, and he's done the hormone testing too. And he is probably our biggest fan and one of our most active brand ambassadors. So he's going to share about his story too. And hey, Burgess, do you want to share about Cody? Because he's our guest next week too. We'll just do a little intro. Is Burgess still here? Yeah. I muted you, Burgess. See if Burgess is here. He may have had to go back to work.
I see him. He just has the mute on. Gotta hit the mute.
So
There
Cody,
Can you
he
hear me?
is.
yeah,
There he
we
is.
can hear you.
Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, I was using my old phone because I couldn't get logged into my new one, but here we go. Yeah, Cody's a guy that I met from another lady I met at a trade show, and he lives in Sault Ste. Marie, and he's gotten us some reishi, some turkey tail, and some chaga. But yeah, his company's called TruNorth, and he's just a good guy. He helps us get us here. 1 second.
I saw some.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I was getting some echo there from my old phone. Yeah, no, I work with him. We've worked with him for the last couple of years, and went to a trade show in Toronto and met up with him in Sault Ste. Marie shortly after, and he showed me a little bit around where he harvests and whatnot. So again, he's like, I would say most people that are passionate about, sourcing products from the wild. He's a lot like, Ben, who, takes a lot of pride in how his practice is and where he likes to source things and make sure everything is done in a good practice in a good way. So yeah, just another cool individual we've met on our path. And yeah, hopefully people can connect and listen to his story about the specific I don't know, I guess mushrooms he has in his neck of wood that we wouldn't necessarily have quite abundantly in this area as well. So I mean, every part of Canada, it's such a vast country. We have, things that are more sustainable to pick in certain areas compared to others. So, I mean, connecting with people in other parts of the country is always a good way for us to diversify and have more products available from Canada to be able to provide to the public. So, yeah, he's a really neat person. Yeah, I enjoy working with him as well. So hopefully everybody comes in and gets a chance to meet with him and get some more information from somebody like that as a whole new perspective on different things, and, just kind of unravel some more cool, interesting facts about natural wild products.
Yeah, so Cody's the one who harvests our chaga, right?
Does some of our chaga, yeah. Yeah, he does chaga, he does our turkey tail, and he does our reishi.
Perfect. Well, thanks.
Ben,
thanks,
do you
Burgess.
harvest any of that? Ben?
Yeah, sorry.
There's really not much for reishi and turkey tail. There's probably turkey tail around here, is there?
Yeah, there is turkey tail. It's just the thing with turkey tail is now it's really well available from farm. So you can farm turkey tail pretty easily. But once again, you come back to what kind of substrate has been used, what kind of farm it's coming from. So me, if I have to choose, I always gonna go towards wild product instead of farmed one, unless I really know the farm really well. So I do harvest some turkey tail, but not to a really large extent. There is some potential, I think. I know some guys around Campbell River, and Rex has been having a guy that harvests 200-300 pounds a year. But you need to be really committed to it, because that's a lot, 200 pounds for such tiny mushrooms. But yeah, no, there is some regarding reishi. We do have the Western reishi here, but that's not the same species that grow back east.
Yeah.
And it's also, even the one back east is different than the one that is farmed usually. So the one that is farmed is Ganoderla lucidum. I'm not too sure to remember the Latin name of the one back east, but the one here is Ganoderma oregonense. And like we do harvest them and sell them just dried, not powder or anything. But once again, there is really little research for now about this species, this specific species here in Western Canada. And I think once again, it probably has some really, really good properties, but it just needs to be proven, you know, and being researched a little bit more. But yeah, no, we do harvest reishi. But yeah, as you said, you know, chaga, reishi, and turkey tail. You're way better volume wise to go Eastern Canada, and that's what you learn as well as you go, is like, you know, some products that I can find here on Vancouver Island, like juniper berries, they do grow on Vancouver Island. We don't harvest them commercially here for two reasons. First, it's hard to find a commercial size patch, but then, you know, it's not a species that is super present here. So you don't want, you know, as we know really little about sustainability of harvesting, it's always better to at least go in an area where it's really, really abundant. So I would rather go in the interior mainland to get juniper berries because there is way bigger patches. So I think for every product, you know, it's always better to try and go where it grows the best, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a question, Ben.
Yes.
Because they're so, like, mushrooms are so popular now and there's a lot of farms, wouldn't it be best to have, like, instead of having a mushroom grown inside a mushroom farm with like growing lights, that it be out exposed to the sun and the moon and the natural elements? Like, I just think from
So-
an energetic perspective, there has to be something that's more special about something grown in the wild as opposed to farmed.
Yeah, once again, what I'm really focused on right now is trying to, you know, lobby at my really little scale as a government or the university as much as I can to try and say, look, like, there is a market for all those products. We know really little. It would be really important to throw money at like actually studying exactly what the compounds, drying ratio, what's the percentage of selected compounds there is in every harvest. And you will find out, that's funny, because in one of my foraging tour 2 days ago, actually, before doing the foraging tour, I always do a small scouting trip, you know, where I'm gonna do the foraging tour. And I was speaking about bracken fern. Bracken fern is quite interesting because that's not something we eat here in Canada, but that's a really staple food in Korea and Japan. And bracken fern does grow everywhere, but it has some carcinogenic compound, and so you have to do a special way to prepare it to remove that actual compound. And they did a few studies because they tend to think that maybe the high consumption of bracken fern by some people in Japan and Korea might be linked to an increased risk of stomach cancer. And they're still not 100% sure about it. But so then they started to look at, okay, what is the compounds that might be responsible for it, and what's the actual percentage of this compound in different spots where we harvested. And what they found out was really weird. It's like in some area where it grows, the content of that specific compound was like sometimes 50 times higher than in other areas. And they even found some spot in New Zealand where actually bracken fern was growing, and they couldn't even find trace of that carcinogenic compound. And I do think that for everything we harvest from the wilderness, that's exactly the same. Unless we have data, it's really hard to say, you know, like the taste, like, you know, even like me, I'm more focused on culinary purposes for most of a product. But, you know, I notice that depending where I harvest the Morel or where I harvest the spruce tip, it's going to be a different taste, you know, sometimes just 10 kilometers apart. And that's all about terroir, you know, like what we have back home in France, that, you know, we've been growing, you know, vineyards in some places for 600 years. And now people know that this specific part of that block gives the best grape at this time of the year to be part of the process for, you know, mixing with other grapes. And I think the more we're going to be experienced about foraging at on our surrounding, the more we're going to be aware of, like, they're actually on the same product, a lot of differences depending where you harvest it. And that's something really important. And another example I can give, when I was a bit younger and doing my master degree, I was looking into maybe growing medicinal plants back home from where I come from, and or harvesting wild medicinal plant. And there was quite a few studies that I read where, like, in one part of France, now they have big farms of, you know, chamomile, or like spearmint, or rosemary, or other, you know, plants that can be used as herbal teas. And they found out that most of the time, you would have 3 to 4 times more active compound in the same plant coming from the wild than coming from a farm. And it does probably make sense. Like, it's probably hard to explain, you know, scientifically. There is still so many interactions that we can't fully understand. But supplying yourself from the wilderness, for me, it's always better. But it comes with a responsibility on the sustainability of the harvest. And I think over the year, you will see as well, probably in forestry management, that you can have a mix of both. You know, it doesn't have to be 100% farm or 100% wild harvested. We can probably manage forest in a way, which is kind of permaculture or agroforestry, where it can enhance the presence of certain plants. You know, like, for example, a lot of the berries we harvest comes from recent cut blocks. But in recent cut blocks, they plant trees. So after a while, you know, the tree is going to take over the berries. Maybe if we were planting the trees at a lower density, you would have a berry patch available for longer. So it's not farming, but it's kind of managing the forest in a way that it's going to maybe produce more of the other products and timber than you want. And that way you can still keep, you know, the good wild harvest, because it's still growing in a wild setting, you know.
Thank you. That's really helpful. What's your master's degree in?
I got a master's degree in agroforestry. So everything that is related to not agronomy or forestry. Like, so basically the definition of agroforestry is growing trees and crops in the same surface unit. So that can be reintroducing trees in agricultural setting, or integrating a crop into a forest environment. And then the wild harvest on non-timber forest product is just one part of the agroforestry. That's the one I got specialized in. But, you know, agroforestry can be as well growing shiitake mushrooms on logs under the cover of maple trees in a maple syrup plantation, for example. It could be as well reintroducing trees in a cornfield every 30 meters lines to improve the ecosystem, because you're gonna bring back more, you know, insect to the soil, and a better biodiversity, and you're gonna protect the crop from the full sun. So that's really, like, agroforestry is the science of understanding the interaction between trees and crops, pretty much.
Fascinating. We really appreciate you being a guest today and sharing your knowledge. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a pleasure for me.
Yeah. Okay, last call for questions before we wrap it up. Thanks everyone that stayed till the end. We had a long one today, but has been fascinating.
Yeah, no question. Just, I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, and good to see you, Andrea, again. And John, thanks so much for joining, Ryan. It's good to see your face.
Thanks.
And talk to you on the phone. And then, yeah, of course, Ben, thanks, man, for taking time out of your busy day to come join us. And yeah, and Maria, thanks for setting this thing up. It was, you know, another successful call, and really enjoyed having this conversation with everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Have a good day.
All right.
We'll
Thank
see
you.
everyone next week. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for the info,
Bye,
Ben.
All the
everybody.
information.
Yeah, it was great.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye, guys.